It's for you.
The film board gathers. The gang of thugs is here to take on a movie currently in theaters, and this month we're headed to the big bad city where everyone is dressed in robes and masks, aged like fine marble. It's Screesixum, where Ghostface follows the waterfront all the way to New York City.
There's never been one like this, Gale. It's franchise time.
Strange that you and I have never spoken on the phone. This is long overdue.
What is this place?
A shrine.
Did you miss me?
He's gonna keep coming after us. Maybe he gets to win this time. We've got to lure him in. And we execute him.
Scream.
I hear you're a horror fan. It's been said.
Everywhere Friday.
Joining me on the show, we have the once future king, Steve Sarmento. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
Oh, and Justin Jaeger's here. Hi, JJ. And Tommy Metz, the handsomest podcaster in the history of podcasters everywhere.
What's your favorite podcast? I can't do the voice.
You guys scream. I totally gaslit myself. I convinced myself that Andy and I had talked about the entire Scream franchise on the next reel, and we have not.
Wow.
The only other Scream show that we've talked about was on the film board. Ocean and Tommy did a film board on Scream 5 or Screeny 22. And they talked about it whenever that came out, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, during the pandemic. It was a pandemic movie.
Yeah.
So, Tom, let's set the table for us here. The last time you were here talking about the Scream movie, you're talking about it on the film board, and you said you're a big fan of the franchise. Correct. Has that changed with Screesixum? I'll stop that joke. It doesn't play for very long.
I don't know. Well, before you go, Tom, is this a new thing? Because we were talking about Metz III and now McForeign. That was last month. So is this a new thing that we're going to infuse numbers into words to make movie titles?
Mithrigic Mike.
Mithrigic Mike.
Yep.
No, I'm an enormous fan of this series. I always have been, and I'm not a big fan of, and I always sort of not cringe, but go gross at the title of slashers. That always like how we just sort of throw that out there. I'm not a big fan of slashers. That means a knife thing. But either way, I'm not a huge fan of slashers, but this is just smart enough, and I like the whodunit aspect. I really liked the thing that I liked about the last one, Scream 22, was how they just came out and said the killer's on the poster.
That was great. Yes.
Yeah, that's really smart. And so I like how knowing how incredibly meta and weird it is. And yeah.
JJ, you are famously new to the franchise. You just binged the whole thing for the first time.
For the first time.
Let's get a quick update on your journey through horror through the eyes of Scream.
Well, so it's interesting because the kind of horror that horror in general is new to me, right? And I'm sort of taking this leap to be able to watch horror and expose myself to these kind of feelings in film that I hadn't for years, and you say famously, as I've been a host on the next reel, I've shied away from this type of suspense and drama and scary stuff. And so even in my approach now to horror, Tommy mentioned slashers. This kind of thing of the jump scare for the sake of jump scare thing is not the kind of horror that I even enjoy going in. But I really enjoy the meta thing. I really enjoy the deep thought aspect of things that can be brought to film. So Scream occupies a really interesting place in that it is both set up specifically for those jump scares for the sake of jump scares. But then also in some of the films, which I just realized because I just watched all 6 in the last 2 weeks, that in some of those, they go into that sort of deep thought writing piece when it comes to the story. Some of the cases in terms of the through line from film to film as well. And when it plays with those things, I love it. And so I have lots of thoughts about the entire franchise. And interestingly enough, this film is about the idea of a franchise. So it works out really nice for our conversation today. And in general, I'm so excited that I went down this journey with Scream, regardless of how I feel about, one film or the other. But, we'll talk about that more as we go into how we feel today.
Steve, I was thinking as I was watching this movie, especially on the heels of Scream 5, that this might have been one of those interesting pivots to change the perspective and make Ghostface the villain and everybody's running from the legend of Billy Loomis's daughter. You also did the whole watch through. I was not aware of that until just moments ago. So how did this all hit you leading into Scream 6? Opening thoughts, please.
For me, the most interesting thing when watching a Scream movie is what's going to be the motivation of the villain, the slasher, the killer, the Ghostface. So for me, it's like, oh, we're going to get the same things. And JJ, I'm right there with you. I love when we're referencing things and we're playing with those ideas, and it goes back to the first one. And to me, it's sort of it can be the Achilles heel of some of these films in the franchise of how well do you address that issue? Because for me, the first one wasn't about that one as much. I mean, that's the thing everybody remembers is there's rules to a scary movie, and they just grab that. Whereas the motivation of the killers is the first one's really, really solid. And then they latch onto this concept of like, oh, we've got rules and we're going to comment on films, and some do better than others. I think this reboot, rehash, reheat, or whatever they're doing. I'm enjoying this. It's Scream for a new generation. I liked a lot of things they did in Scream 2022 with like the Rian Johnson jokes. They're updating it. And so I'm intrigued to see with this one, how they sort of run parallel. If we look at the first 4 as a set and is 2022 and then moving forward as a set, how do they sort of compare and parallel along? Because I think they draw attention to some of those things in this one. So I'm all on board. I'm not like a super fan of these films, but I'm always intrigued with what are they going to do? Because it's like the known quantities. Like, how is Ghostface come into play? What characters are we bringing back? How are we referencing Stab? All of that. So it's a familiar playground. I like to see what the filmmakers bring to it.
Well, and I think, when do we run out of gas? Right? Yeah. That's the thing I found myself thinking the entire time is I'll say up front, I enjoyed my time with this movie. I had a good time, and I like the new core 4. And I think this one could have been called Scream 6: The Great House Cleaning, because now pretty much everybody from the original canon is gone, and we have this new core group of people that are making their way through the universe together. And there are some things that are happening that are different than we would normally expect from a Scream franchise, and I think that's kind of delightful. And I also think it's interesting to me that this movie holds up under the weight of missing original cast members quite well. I did not miss Sydney. I didn't miss Dewey. I didn't miss any of those old people. And frankly, when Gail ultimately met her end, I was okay with that. Like, it's sort of fine to use this opportunity of the rechise, right? Rebooting the franchise to do that house cleaning, but how much gas is left in the tank, right? In terms of how creative can we be just talking about the meta nature of movies and how they play out in real life. And I'm curious about that, because this movie still leans pretty heavily into the gestalt of filmmaking, and I wonder where it could possibly go from here. To that question, because of the meta nature of Ghostface and referential cinema, is it possible they've kind of unwittingly created a truly never-ending franchise?
First, I thought Gail lived.
She did.
oh crap, she lived. It was
It's
my
in voice.
deep
It's in
hope.
voice. It's weird. We don't see her
Yes.
again, but they're like,
Right.
she's going to be fine, and the other person's hopped up on drugs.
You know, you're absolutely right. Yep,
at the
she's
crime
gonna-
scene.
you know what? I think I misinterpreted that. I thought they were talking about somebody else was going to be fine.
There
And
were
then
so
Gail
many
was
people that
dead.
ended up being fine. It was kind of like a blizzard.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
and so my question to that in the core 4 thing is, and Tommy, you know this because you just did this, and I literally just watched this movie 3 days ago. Didn't Chad die in Scream 2022?
No.
Who's Chad?
Chad is core 4.
Oh, the brother.
Yeah.
Or four.
No,
they were all deeply injured.
He was horribly injured and then lived.
And
he
so,
gets
so
dragged
much,
out.
so much so that at the end of this, when we have the really elaborate scene of him being, crucified and killed, and then they literally say, as he's being hauled in the ambulance, "How are you alive?"
Right.
That's how I felt when I saw him on screen in this one. I was like, "Wait, that
Yeah.
can't be the same Chad."
I thought Kirby died.
I
remembered Kirby dying.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember
and-
everyone dying.
And
Yes.
Kirby, let's be clear, Kirby did die after
Right.
Scream 4. She was brought back to life in a photo in Scream 5 because
Yeah,
everybody
that's right.
liked Hannah Tear so much in that movie. So I think she, for all intents and purposes, she was supposed to be dead.
Right.
Yeah.
So
No, with Chad, he's the Dewey of this sort of
you think
iteration.
Chad's
He's
the Dewey
because
of the
you always think he gets stabbed or killed, and he somehow always survives. So
he's going to show
me,
up with a
he's-
cane in Scream 7.
Exactly.
Tom, I'm sorry. We totally hijacked your point. Go ahead.
No, to go back to your original question about the truly never-ending franchise, I'm always surprised. I mean, this film series is so cannibalistic.
Yeah.
Like it eats itself alive over and over again. And this one seems like the most of that. That it's so, while moving on forward, it's so obsessed with the old movies, with the lineup of killers. It's like relitigating all of that again. I do wonder how much, I mean, because in this attempt to move on, it's so rooted in the past. The Billy Loomis is showing up. It's just, it's a little crazy. I don't know. That makes me question the amount of gas that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, and to go into a really structural way about the gas. So after Scream 5, the Scream 2022, they gave the dedication, they said, for Wes, right? So has Wes Craven passed away? Is that the idea?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you have
dedication
the idea.
was spelled DEAD, by the way.
What?
It's just so
dedication was spelled DEAD.
Really?
Dedication. Never mind. No.
Wait. That's your pun. Great. Okay. I'm like, wait a second. Is that an Easter egg?
He's just waiting for everybody to get
joke.
it.
Dedication for Wes. Get it? And everyone's like, oh my God.
Gallows match.
No, so my point is to go in terms of how much gas is that really, I mean, he's the originator. So maybe it's worth our examination and analysis to see if the franchise has taken over new life, different feeling because of the different writer, or, the ideas here. But obviously, if they're going to go somewhere else with this, it's going to have a new opinion or a new sort of origin for what it is. I get a little bit in this movie, but I think, again, not knowing that had happened to Wes Craven, watching the movie, I actually was satisfied with the way that they approached this. And even with all that rehash, even with the relitigating that you're talking about, Tommy, I felt like it fit. Right? It felt like it fit into the franchise. So I think even though I don't know where they were going to go or what they're going to do, I think a Wes Craven devotee could do a great job with something new that I haven't thought of in regards to this.
So, Pete, back to your initial question you had for me about, if we were to pivot this a little bit from the perspective of Ghostface and focus on, this daughter of Billy Loomis and all that. To me, that's where they've perfectly set things up. Because to me, I saw this as we're actually cleaning house of all the baggage of the prior Scream films, the whole stab movie within a movie thing. That's all wiped clean. Because to me, this really started setting up two things, and I didn't see it as much in Scream 2022, but there was something about that core 4 that just really resonated with me in terms of like Gen Z right now and the whole issue of like surviving school shootings. of being those people that are survivors and what place that puts them in society. And then you've got this whole issue of Sam being the daughter of Billy Loomis and whatever trauma or psychosis or whatever we call it. Those are the really interesting aspects of Scream 6 for me. It was nice to see all the references and the sort of counting backwards to the origins. I love that as a device, but I wanted more of the core four and Sam dealing with her trauma. And I'm hoping that that's the launch pad, that they take this in a new direction to just get away. I don't need any more things about Stab or kids, being fascinated and quoting horror movies to each other as much. It seemed to lean too heavily. It started leaning too heavily into that in Scream 4. And I thought we're on fumes. And to me, there's a new opportunity to explore some things.
So bring in Ari Aster because no? Can we agree?
No.
I do like the pivot, but it's still the same, because all Wes Craven movies, if you had to boil it down to one thing, it's that the children are paying the price for something that their parents did.
Yeah.
That's Nightmare on Elm Street. That's everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is still doing that, but in a new way, where she's paying the price of having a homicidal father.
Yes.
And so she has homicidal tendencies. It's just a neat way to still honor that Wes Craven core value, but still put it on its
But I think to that point, Tom, like I'm more than half serious that that's the movie that I would like to see, because they've set it up now twice by having her revisited by Skeet Ulrich. Like, she's dealing with some serious stuff, and I would love to see her totally unravel. And I think, honestly, that would give Melissa Barrera something to do. Right.
Yeah.
I found the same challenge in this movie that you guys had with Scream 5, Tom, was that the real spark on screen was Jenna Ortega, and Melissa Barrera was a real suitable utility player, but wasn't written in a way that was anything more than kind of nanny state. And I really, it was the exact same thing. I think she's very good, Melissa Barrera. She's really good. But that the star is Jenna Ortega. And you can tell that in the marketing and everything, because Jenna Ortega is not in this movie as much as Melissa Barrera, but
she's hosting Saturday Night Live.
But she's hosting Saturday Night Live this weekend. Yes, exactly the point. So, and
she's fantastic in it. That's the other thing. Like, just to talk about her performance, like, and my kids, my 11-year-old, knowing that we're going to do this week, he's like, "Oh, Jenna Ortega's in that." I mean, she's ubiquitous in culture right now. So that's kind of the thing, and it's great. So I mean, but that would be what you're describing. If you want to see her unravel, which I don't actually know if I do. I really like her as a hero, and I like her conquering her demons. I like that storyline that we're going with. So I think that's what's interesting is to consider the realm of, if they're going to subvert it to the degree where you break up the sisters, that is something that's completely different from, the sort of family movie that we get when we have these primary characters that are never working against each other in the same movie. A lot of that happens off screen, right? We have the divorce of Dewey and Gail, these things. And then we're always presented with them with this sort of opportunity to work together. But we never see our main protagonists, whoever the lead is, working against each other. So that would be potentially very interesting.
If we look at the first iteration of the Scream franchise, which was, we had, look at who our killers are, right? So in Scream 2, it's a parent, with a sidekick, whatever. And so we get that in this one. In the third one, in Scream 3, we do have siblings at play, because it is Sydney and her long lost brother from her mother, prior, whatever. So it's possible, very possible, that we're going to do siblings again in Scream 7, and that they're setting that up for the sisters to be at odds with one another.
That would be wild.
Yeah.
That would be wild.
I think it goes to when you're talking about the grief of going through something traumatic like school shootings, right?
Yeah.
That's something I saw too. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about Scream 5 is we commented just generally on how much daylight there is. That's a movie that's just very bright.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a thing we're going through, is look at the horrors that we visit unto one another in the daylight. We don't have to be scared of the dark anymore, because things can get awful any time of day, it turns out.
Yeah.
This movie was, to me, by moving out of Woodsboro and moving into the big city, we get to explore the nature of public violence, that it can come from anywhere in a group and you're still not protected. The assassination on the train, which I thought was kind of extraordinarily vile and terrifying. Like, I thought it was just great. What do you think about that? Am I alone in sort of seeing that pivot, the horrors in public in this movie? Is that shared?
Yes, and that goes back to a Kevin Williamson, the writer of the original Screams, and I See What You Did Last Winter, whatever it was called.
I know
He was one of his biggest things was always having someone killed when they're just about to be in public. Like, there's a parade going by in I Can't Believe What You Did Last Summer. I know I'm just getting it wrong.
I know what you did last summer.
I know what you did last summer. Or they're just in the balcony. They're just on the other side. And then he did that with the soundproof booth in one of the Screams.
Yes.
He's really big on that. And I think that's incredibly there's something really evocative about that, about the savior of being in public, being just inches away and still not being able to help. Because when they said we're moving to New York, I was like, oh, well, that's it. Like, it's not going to work. The fishbowl is gone. But I think it really opens it up. Yeah. And then to have that beginning scene, not the cold open, but the one in the gas station or that 7-Eleven thing, that really sort of ripped off of like, oh, okay, nowhere is safe. They're able to make New York as much of a fishbowl because now we have shotguns. Yikes. Yeah.
Well, I loved the cold open. I thought that was used very well. I thought that was one of my favorite scenes of the entire movie. And I feel like the momentum in the first half of this film is fantastic.
We should walk. Can you walk through briefly what the cold open did in this movie? Yeah. Because it's sort of an onion of cold open.
Well, but I would like to do that. Where do you want me to bookend it? Speaking of onions.
Well, that's a good. I'll tell you what. You just start, and we'll see if we get to the end of the movie.
This movie is also a fun Ready or Not reunion with the therapist, the cold open, and then the director's Radio Silence. Are the ones that made it. Go ahead, Gene.
So I'm not familiar with any of those things, Tom. So I don't know what you mean by that.
The directors of this also wrote and directed a film called Ready or Not, which the lead was Samara Weaving, and the therapist was the head of the family in it. So they just brought back their old movie friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotcha. And Samara Weaving is the initial girl. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. She's the film professor. Yeah,
yeah. And so she's at the bar waiting to meet someone for a first date. Is this what you want? You want a synopsis here?
Yes, please.
And she's called, and she's sort of audibly and visibly nervous to meet this person, but excited. It seems like her sort of anxiety is built on the fact that she really wants to have a good first date. And she receives the call, which is the hallmark of all Scream movies. And this person on the line sort of flirts with her enough to get her outside and to get her into an alley in New York, even though there is people, everywhere that can see. He gets her to a place where she is alone and isolated, and kills her there. And I think it's a great sort of take on the sort of what the franchise has done in terms of its cold opens, and bringing in an actress that is known and is attractive and is is someone that's very vulnerable at the initial part of the movie, to bring her to the place to set exactly what we're looking at, to create the setting of how people are vulnerable in wherever they go. And that right away, talking about taking out the sort of safety of public of New York, happens as definitely part of the cold open there.
Well, and I think for me, the point immediately after that, where he gets down and kneels and removes the mask, right? That was different from
Right.
the lab. This is the first time that's happened in this.
And it was a killer that we didn't know.
We didn't know.
Right.
And so he very casually puts his stuff back in his backpack, goes back to his apartment. And to me, we're still in cold open territory, right? Because he goes back to his apartment and he's talking to his friend who on the phone, and that's another call. Right? We're now in another call. The killer's in a call. And it turns out the killer's in a call with a different killer because his roommate with whom he was planning these other Ghostface, like he's already trying to become a copycat. He's planning all these things. His copycat roommate has already been killed. And we get introduced to the real Ghostface in this movie wearing the antiqued mask, the aged mask, and that starts the movie as this original guy in the cold open is killed. So now, instead of like the first girl in Scream getting killed and the phone call and all the Scream phone call, now we have the killer being killed after killing the girl. And I think that was really fun. It was a Rube Goldberg machine of murders. It's a crazy machine. And I really, really liked that. I thought that was a thing that allowed them to level up this movie.
Well, like I said, the beginning of the film felt perfect to me. And that's and when we talk about the Scream franchise, I think in general, as watching all these 6 movies, each one has a sort of different level of appreciation for logic in the universe. And the first half of this movie feels perfect in the way that it's written for logic of what's happening. I never felt like I was questioning whether or not this would happen. It's delivered well from an acting perspective. It's written perfectly for the way around it. Now, in the second half of that movie, this movie, it fails lots of places that I had lots of struggles with. But there were entire films in the Scream franchise that were utter failures in terms of logic problems. This film at least had the first half when they're like what you're talking about, Pete, like bringing us into the world and allowing us to examine how we felt safe in public, and all those things were set up perfectly in this film. And I was very happy with that.
Well, to transition to the second half of the movie, I was watching an interview with the production team and the writers, and one of them said, Scream 5 is greatest hits of Scream. And if Scream 5 is greatest hits, then Scream 6 is the punk rock B-side. And I thought that was weird. I think he had it backwards.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, this is the greatest hits.
There is a greatest hits movie in Scream, it's Scream 6. Because in the second half of the movie, we start to unravel the fact that the killers are leaving the masks who have, at the different scenes from the greatest hits of the past killers. It's literally a memory lane tour. So how did the unraveling of that, since JJ, I know already has problems, start with Steve, how did the actual whodunit part work for you?
I played along with it. And then when things are revealed, there was a schism that happened where there seemed to be a gigantic pivot for a character of like, oh, I'm a normal person. Oh, I'm a lunatic. And to me, like I said, the strength of the movies, I think, really hinges on the rationale of the killers. And this one just really fell apart for me in this one. It just did not hold together well because I love the idea. And I mean, for anybody listening, we're in spoiler territory now. So, I mean, we're going to get into this. So I love the idea that they point out like, hey, there's been X number of killers and we've had pairs before. So I'm like, okay, we know this. We always know that there's somebody that's a suspect. Oh, but they were there at that point. Oh, remember there's 2 so that somebody can always be present as an alibi. But when we say, oh, there's 3 and I have to look at timeline because this takes place, like 6 months after the first film. So there's time for this trio to basically mourn the death of a sibling, go completely off the rails bonkers. I don't get that. Like, dad lost it, great. But to get both his kids dragged in, I was like, no. I mean, unless genetically you're all just, we're going to say, there's psychosis genetically being passed down here. I really, really struggled with that. I mean, I love the red herring with Kirby, all of that. But for me, that's where this went off the rails. There were great moments. the way things were structured, if I set aside motivation, everything going on in that sort of kill box in the theater, I liked a lot of the dynamics of the chase and how things were set up, but I just couldn't get past Dermot Mulroney suddenly like, I'm going to play crazy now. Just was not, it didn't sit well with me at all.
Tom is laughing, I would say maniacally. What is going on? And what is going on down there?
I agree with everything that Steve is saying, and yet I just went with it. I think I'm maybe built to go with it, or because Scream 2022 was such a logic pretzel. Like I was like, what? And then my brain started to go, no, but wait, the sheriff like switched a body in an active crime scene. His daughter's just going to like disappear for the rest of her life because they're pretending you're like, none of it works if you stop to think about it. And instead I went, run, there's knife. I mean, when you rethink it, and I really realized why I was laughing is I didn't rethink it until just now. And it does not hold up. And it is a real problem. And I still enjoyed the hell out of it. I didn't, because I thought the filmmaking was so strong in a lot of it, that also the brutality has really ramped up since the last movie and this one. I mean, the brutality of like, we used to be afraid of, I'm going to get stabbed once.
Right.
That's like, phew.
Oh, yes, exactly. That's
like, you're psyched to get stabbed just once, because now they're just
stabbed
like,
once.
so much stabbed. We're also out of orifices for knives to go into.
Well, and did you notice like how many like knife twists there are? Like, I know that's the metaphor, don't twist the knife. This movie, they twist the knife every time. In the gut, in the throat, in the head. Like, they're always twisting. It was extraordinary.
Because the movie, other than the subway scene, I didn't find this movie very scary. But there was still fear involved because of the brutality. Like, I still wanted them to get away, because not getting away is so horrible.
Well, I would say I think the absolutely the subway that was seriously threatening. I think the escape from the apartment on the ladder sequence was also incredibly intense. Maybe not for the stabbing, like that wasn't particularly horrible, but just gravity. Like, I just didn't want him to fall. It was really intense. Like
there are other things you can do with ladders, though.
Yes.
There are.
They made it as if it was a tight wire. But there are. I mean, so this is where we get into the sort of logic problems of like, oh, you have many different options here that you are just not trying because it's for the sake of the film. And many of the machines that they use in the movie, and I shouldn't even say machines, but like the characters in this movie don't understand guns. For as good as they are with them, they don't know how to use them.
Right, because they've only seen knives before, JJ.
I guess, but the cop who literally is being charged by someone with a gun pointed at them does not shoot. And then in literally the next scene, we see him with a dead shot accuracy hitting people, hitting mannequins in the face over and over again. But he had at least 4.5 seconds to shoot at someone who was charging directly on him with a gun pointed at her, and never used it. I mean, there's where I get into the logic problems of the things that are there. They're written for the movie. And just like you're saying, Tommy, I enjoyed it. But if you're looking to reason this stuff out, don't. Because that's where it falls apart. The first half of this movie doesn't have any of that. The first half is so well written and is so perfectly conceptualized that you are just along for the ride and you're loving it. But as soon as you start getting into these like other set pieces, it kind of falls apart, unfortunately, which makes me sad.
I think that was a challenge that I had too, JJ, and it was when our principal character said, "Let's lure them into this theater and make a kill box."
Right.
I was done with the logic of the movie at that point. Like,
that makes sense.
I think it was fun and fine. And the fact that we have a family affair, like they're always kind of family affairs, right? Like I kind of get that. But the final sequence in the theater was just a dance of blocking and violence. It was, I was no longer into the emotional intensity of the film.
Reminds me of Scream 2. Which and they harkened back to Scream 2 a lot because of the college thing in this, and then of course you have the theater and the stage. the van, all this stuff. But in my opinion, Scream 2 is the weakest of the franchise. So all of a sudden we get this sort of thing where, of course, the thing that we're paying most homage to is not the greatest. And I feel like that second half of the film really kind of dropped it for me in this one because of that.
Tom, we switched to franchise rules. How did you feel about the interpretation of franchise rules?
We've been doing especially in Scream 5, they make a real big deal about the requel, and she gives the new Randy's cousin.
Yeah.
Who is Randy's cousin?
Uncle? Niece, maybe?
Niece. Yeah.
Uncle Randy. Yeah, I think it's his niece.
Yeah.
I try to get more excited about the fact that things are changing, but back in 3 of Patrick Dempsey is that's when they start screaming about all rules are off. We've done this. We've done the no one's safe, everything changes. They're trying to make it seem like it's a new path, but they've been ringing this bell since 3. So
yeah. Even the conversation, like we've had it in a college classroom, we've had it in front of a TV at the original Woodsboro house. We've had the conversation, the recitation of rules, and here we have it on the quad under a park bench where they say that not everybody is no one is safe. Even the people that you think are safe, don't worry, they're not safe. And it turns out, of course, yes, the killer was on the poster.
Right. And so many people are safe.
So many people are safe. And that is actually one of the interesting things. So when you look at this, Steve, you look at this movie in the context of Scream, it's not I don't think you can anymore count the number of people who are killed in the Scream movies. You have to count the number of people who were stabbed and survived.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But I think more people survived than died.
Well, they set that up in Scream 5, right? With our cold open with Jenna Ortega, right? And she survives.
And we keep Jenna Ortega.
Right. It was a nice twist. We're going to do something different. We're going to violate our own rules and expectations, which I appreciate. But then when you have the scene of, these are the franchise rules and legacy characters, even, I'm like, but to Tommy's point, that's not new. You haven't done anything. If you're going to reinvent this, twist it around. But not to the point of, oh, well, I'm sorry, it's just a flesh wound. Everybody's going to be okay unless you get stabbed 20 times, right? Mm-hmm. That seems to be the thing. But I think that even happened to Chad. I mean, there were 2 Ghostface near him. I'm like, so Chad can get stabbed a dozen times and it's not lethal. But as you said, that was the great thing in the first one. The first, few was if a knife impacted on you, you were gone. Right. There was a lethality to that of the wound and the injury. You were done. Except Sydney does get stabbed, sort of a grazing blow in the first one when she's in the van. But I don't know why we're ramping things up. I guess if we're going to have more violence and gore, then the extreme ones are going to be the death, and so we can have people get stabbed and it's not as lethal. Again, I don't know what the rules are that they're trying to establish with this one. And it's maybe we just call it, instead of Scream 6, it's just going to be like Stabby, we'll just call it Stabby 7.
Well, wait a second. I have what you were talking about. Where's the gas for the franchise?
Yeah.
What if they just make Stab 7? No, I mean, really, instead we have Scream 1 through 6. And then instead of making Stab 1 through 6, the next movie in this franchise is Stab 7.
Yes, but it's presented, you go to the movie theater, it's presented with the silhouette of the core 4 sitting in the audience in front of you.
What a cool idea. Oh my gosh, let's write it. I love it.
Can't wait for the next movie to start and it turns out Dermot Mulrooney's fine. It starts and he's like, that was a close one. And you're like, this sucks.
Well, it does get to that. One of the criticisms, I think, of a lot of horror movies from the larger medical community is we could have fixed that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right. And so, some of that is this movie saying, okay, there is a reality that there's a medical establishment with people who know how to sew people up and fix, stabbed organs. And let's just, maybe that needs to be another layer of reality that we put on this. You're not just going to get stabbed a couple of times and die. There's a ticking clock behind every injury. Yeah. And sometimes you win. the ticking clock. Speaking of, we've got to talk about Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hayden Panettiere is back.
Mm-hmm.
What an interesting performance this was from Hayden Panettiere, I think.
Posy.
Right?
I thought she was doing, I mean, I think she's fine and stuff, but it seemed like a joke. I don't know.
Well,
she was so
seems like a joke in Scream 4 though too.
Yeah.
Like I actually think what you're talking
Okay.
about, like that kind of goes into her character. The Kirby character is really a caricature in Scream 4.
Yeah.
So for her to come in and be a different kind of Posey, right? Like it may actually connect to who Kirby is as a character.
The problem is Kirby's performance, or her performance in this film, comes after the existence of Will Arnett's improvisational detective show,
Murder Town.
Murder Town.
Yes.
And I could not help but imagining Hayden Panettiere coming on set and saying, "Okay, here's our beat. Here's what you're going to kind of be met with. Just roll with it."
Right.
And this is what we got. I think to your point, JJ, like her quippiness, like she's the quippy kind of trivia horror fanatic in Scream 4. I really liked her in Scream 4 because I felt like I understood what that character was. Making her the FBI agent and then the questionable FBI agent of questionable intellectual integrity or emotional integrity, I think was an interesting thing. But nowhere in after the reveal when Dermot Mulroney comes and says, "Oh, she's psychotic. Don't trust her." I never came back around and believed that she was actually not. I thought, okay, don't save her. She's nuts. She's broken.
Exactly.
Let her die.
Right.
Yeah.
Are subways really that dark in New York? Does that really happen? Okay. So that was for the film too.
Well, I've only been to New York a couple times, but the lights have never gone out. That's
Okay,
like a very old school subway.
Well, I have
That's
been
like
on
Welcome
trains.
Back Cotter kind of era of New York subway.
I have been on trains in foreign countries where that happens pretty regularly, actually. But it seemed very weird. It seemed like set up for the film to have that moment be more intense.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was New York-esque.
Yeah, I wish they would have taken a cab.
Yes.
But then you wouldn't get to see that the entire city is in costume on Halloween. Right.
Again, this is why the second half of the movie is just all written for the purpose of the film. Whereas like that first half of the movie, I just felt so excited and then everything started falling apart for me.
Yeah. And I can say that I agree with that. And I was still along for the ride most of the time.
Well,
We don't, when Halloween comes along, we don't dress as serial killers, right?
Right.
No.
Like, I also like that everyone is just always wearing these horrific costumes that were involved in crimes.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't really happen, does it? I don't know.
No,
like
you think the police or just societal norms would be like, dude, that's in really bad taste.
Yeah,
you
that's
don't
terrible.
dress up like that. That's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, right. That whole train was in bad taste. But it does give us such a really interesting, and again, to our earlier point, threatening sequence of blink, right? Like whenever the lights go out, the character gets closer to you. And I have to say, I think this is one of those examples where the trailer reveal of this sequence was a fantastic setup to the actual sequence in the movie, because in the trailer you get the feeling that they're all together on the train. All of our principal core four characters are together on the train, and in the movie they're not. They've been separated, and I found myself kind of on the edge of my weird recliner seat in the movie theater thinking, wow, they've separated those characters. How are they possibly going to let this sequence play out? And I think it played out really, really well. Like it was an awesome and threatening kind of event.
But why do they get separated? Like, crowded. I mean, honestly, like,
so crowded.
Like they're
so crowded. Halloween crowds.
I guess,
Halloween crowds.
And we're just, not thinking about the fact that we're running from mortal danger, and our sister is we're leaving behind with the person that we only included along because we do think he's the serial killer, but we were keeping an eye on him. But we unfortunately let our sister get trapped with him. Yeah, it's just.
And
it's New York.
He is the killer.
I know, and he is. So it's just like,
Yeah, and at that point, like I think 2 of the 3 killers were actually on the train together. Like that was that
would be an interesting like production notes. Like in this scene, who's Ghostface? Is it dad? Is it the brother? Is it the sister? So I'm assuming best intentions on everybody's behalf, that that in planning that, they're like, okay, in this sequence, it's got to be this person because we know so-and-so is here and this person has to be here doing these things. That I would assume, at least, to JJ, at least in the first half of the movie, yes. In the second half, I have no idea because logic seemed to have been cast aside in terms of, what's pertinent to exciting storytelling. But it's something I started thinking about watching this because of Three Killers, of what's sort of the chess piece going on behind the scenes of like, how do we account for everybody? And so at what point is who and who the killer? Because they do address that does come up in Scream 2022, I think, because one of them says, "Oh yeah, I got to kill Dewey." It's like they're claiming credit for the kills and everything, which was kind of cool. There's that prestige of like, I killed a legacy character. Here it's like we don't know who was in the room with Gale, but it's clearly again the things that I've learned not to do when a friend of mine is being about to be killed by somebody and I have a gun pointed at them, I shouldn't say, "Hey, Ghostface," to let them know I'm there before shooting. I should just take the shot.
I hated that so much. Just shoot him. And okay, so my favorite thing about the entire Scream franchise that I always want them to do more of is when people are beating up Ghostface. Like the sort of like you're in mortal danger, you're actually, and they do it a lot. A lot of people get hits on Ghostface all this time.
Oh, in the head all the time. Yeah.
Finish off. Like you've literally got Ghostface on the floor. You're kicking them in the stomach. You're like, and then when is your choice to run instead of just like, I'm winning now. I should take this person out completely. Yes, the whole time. In this movie, it was a lot too. I'm like, you can win this. You have the chance and you give it up so freely. Yes. I want more beat up of Ghostface. I want more justice, more retribution.
Yes.
More retribution.
So you're in Sam's camp then, right? Like it feels good to stab somebody 20 something times and it felt right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Can we talk about
the serial killers?
Can we talk about favorite kills
in this movie?
Yeah, that's what this movie is about.
Well, can we just just favorite stabs because so many people don't actually die.
So many people survive. Right?
Yeah.
I think the subway sequence was my favorite sequence.
Subway sequence. All right. Because last time I think we talked about our favorite one was the one in the kitchen, the slow push on what's his name. That was gruesome. Refrigerator. And so I don't know about. I'm thinking about that. Steve, what do you got?
I think probably the one that just sticks with me the most is Mindy's girlfriend, because she's the one that gets stabbed in the gut. There's the turn of the knife, yet she's still completely capable of like making it across the ladder, of just like, I'm gutting this out type of thing. So there was something about,
so to speak,
that. Yes, exactly. And as we had that overhead shot, I'm like, what floor are they on? Because how lethal is that? It's like, oh, maybe a broken leg or hip, but it's like, oh no, you're going to hit your head on the dumpster. And so
that was rough.
What was interesting about that one was the kill was really incidental. I mean, although Ghostface is the one that sort of flips her off the ladder, it's like, no, it was just, sort of bad luck that you hit the dumpster on the way down that did you in. Although she probably would have bled out. But that one I found interesting because it wasn't a direct Ghostface kill. It was more,
it was Ghostface adjacent.
Yes,
that would have been cool if Dermot Mulroney and his two kids show up at the theater and the dumpster. Like the dumpster also rolls up, and they're like, "Boy, oh boy, everyone's in on it."
JJ, you have a favorite?
Following what we were just talking about, I think the retribution that Sam gets when she stabs Dermot Mulroney on the stage
so many
is
times.
probably the most emotionally satisfying one to me. I actually did like as Chad goes down with the two ghost faces on either side of him. I thought that was ridiculous and but also like in the graphic nature of this film, like it felt like part of this universe. I think as we keep talking about this, I'm trying to be objective and like, if there ever was a film to desensitize us to murder and to violence,
we're here.
Exactly. It's just like, this is fine. And there's a therapist who was killed down the block last week, like
in the face.
He's killed in the iron.
I think I think this is, you guys are going to have to correct me. It's been a couple of days, but the actual act of the stab is still firmly lodged in my head. But now I don't remember who received it. I think it's Tony Revolori. In the very first, he's the first mask revealing killer. The film student. He gets it in. I think he gets it in the throat, and there is a twist. Right, he gets the mouth in the. He gets killed in the mouth, and then twisted, and there's like a click as something happens.
No.
That's
not him. Who was that?
That's the son.
That's the son.
That guy from Avatar, Jack Champion.
Yeah. That's when he gets it in the mouth, and there's a twist. Yeah,
it's that one. That's I think that was my favorite one.
Yeah, that was Jenna Ortega, because that's when she comes down off of the balcony.
Oh, you're totally right.
Yeah.
And he stabs her as she's coming down, but while stabbed, she stabs him in the face.
Yes.
She kills him in the mouth.
Which he survives.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yes.
Perfect. It's perfect. It's how it should. It's how it should be. Favorite call out, standout performances. Anybody you want to call out before we wrap up?
Jenna Ortega. I think so. I haven't watched Wednesday, and it's just she conveys emotion in such a wonderful way. As an audience member, as I'm watching her go through things, it was hard for me in the first half of the film because she was dismissive, right? She was dismissive of the danger and all these things. But in her character arc of this, when she starts appreciating the sort of emotional depth of the situation, and she conveys it. And I ended up going on the ride with her, which I didn't expect. And I really like her. I mean, I found myself saying so many times with just her single lines, I was like, oh, she's really great. So I was really moved by what she did, and I'm super impressed by what she can do on screen.
I really enjoy Jasmine Savoy Brown, and I think she's really great. But it struck me, I was like, where have I seen her before? Because I've never seen Yellow Jackets. I definitely,
that's where I know her from.
Yeah, okay, I've seen Laggies. Obviously, I knew her from Scream 2022, but I have been spending an inordinate amount of time with her because I've been beating her up as Spider-Man Miles Morales. She plays kind of one of the big kind of enemies and emotional kind of interest in that thing, and she's really good in the video game. And so I felt like, God, she's so familiar. Oh, she's like low-key living in my head on my TV. Really, really great.
Does anybody know how old Roger Jackson, the voice of Ghostface, is? I mean, he's been doing this for almost 30 years. So at what point, I mean, that's the other, I mean, that was the one moment that was interesting to me, was Ghostface on the phone with Gale as sort of like the two longstanding characters. But then I have to, when Ghostface says, Gale, finally we get to talk or something, I'm like, but dude, you've never talked to her because it's not like you're Ghostface that's been a thing. You're not possessed by the spirit of Ghostface. You're just some cop or a kid or something. I don't know. But that's the one thing that I feel like if we're going to run out of gas is if we ever lose Roger Jackson as the voice of Ghostface, because it is the iconic piece that really, to me, that's what makes Ghostface
the Frog. So
yeah,
I think that somebody's going to be able to do it.
But it's not the same. It's a little bit different. But that's what makes, for me, is always that appeal of when that phone rings and hearing that voice and what he's able to convey, the menace and the way he talks to me is still the thing that just always makes me enjoy these films, is that performance through the phone. For that, I mean, that's really the standout for me, is always what he brings to that.
He's 65.
Okay. All right.
Still trucking.
All right.
Still trucking. I think this. I think the last thing I have to say, just as an unbelievable segue, is that this is the first movie that I've seen in theaters that has explicitly called out Letterboxd as a thing.
That's right.
And this in the same week that the MPAA has called out Letterboxd to do the love letters from Letterboxd thing in promotion to for the Oscars, for the Academy Awards this year, which was incredible. It was a lovely sort of note to a team that we certainly love around here and have been longtime partners with Letterboxd. If you are not a Letterboxd user yet, it's the best social network for movie lovers, and a lot of us over here put our reviews and ratings and our watch lists, diaries, movie diaries over on letterboxd.com. You can definitely find us at letterboxd.com/thenextreel. There is a set of paid tiers, or 2 paid tiers if you want to get rid of ads and support the wonderful Kiwi team that makes this service. You can get 20% off by using the discount code NEXTREEL at checkout. It works for pro or patrons, and it works for renewals as well. Thank you, Letterboxd, for being a constant and fantastic partner for the Next Reel. So, out of 5 stars, guys, where do you put this movie? Closing thoughts and ratings, please. Steve?
I was leaning towards 3.5, but JJ brought me back to earth, and I'm going with a 3 on this one because I did enjoy it. And the thing is, I was trying to look at my rankings all throughout the franchise because it starts off really high with the first Scream and slowly trickles down. And then it came back up with 2022. But yeah, the last half of this just made me so angry. So it's not that it lost stars. It's like I knocked them off. I shook the ladder to toss those stars off. So I'm down to 3 on this one.
All right, JJ.
I'm a 3 as well, but for more of a positive reason, in that it's on the plus side of half there, and I really enjoyed being able to watch this franchise. And I feel like, again, I think the first half of this film of Scream 6 is kind of immaculate in what it does here. So I agree. I was very angry with the second half, but I leave it at 3 because I'm still going to see these movies because they're fun. Mm-hmm. But all of those logic problems, like, they drive me nuts. So 3 out of 5 for me, and a like as well.
Okay, so you're full heart mode then.
Yeah.
Thomas.
Much like last time with Ocean, I'm going to go 3.5, and there's a chance when I rewatch this, it's going to go down to 3. But right now, 3.5, because I just had a great time with it, and I just really like this franchise.
I think I probably, if I weren't with you guys right now, I probably would be a 3. But I feel bad for the movie a little bit. If I look at the overall sort of proportion of the movie that I enjoyed versus the parts of the movie that I didn't, I'm going to give it a 4. I think most of the time I had a great time with it. It was right up until Killbox when I sort of lost the thread a little bit, and that was kind of the end. That's the climax. But I'm going to give it. I'll be again like Tom and say maybe next time it'll drop a little bit, but I had a great time at the movie. I loved seeing it in the theater. I haven't seen a Scream movie in the theater in a long time, and so it was fun. And I was sitting next to I was in the middle of a group of singles, and they were all kind of big guys who were very exuberant in their feelings about this movie, and every kill was just loud, raucous, oh man, in the face, like all of the kinds of things that you would get. It made it a great experience on top of being a pretty darn good movie.
So I love that, and I'm glad you talked about that, because with horror being new for me, I haven't been to the theater for a horror film that I can remember at all. And my theater experience was really negative in that I was sitting next to to a family, and the younger people, and they're grown children, but like they were like maybe college age kids, whatever. The dad, who was a bit older than me, the younger were doing the sort of talking and stuff, and he was constantly yelling at them to stop talking and like having full-on conversations like, we will leave this theater and all this stuff, and I'm like, taking me out of the movie. And then the boy, he's like a 21-year-old boy or something, fell asleep like 3/4 through, and then started pawing me. Like he was like reaching over to me. I was like, oh my goodness! Like it was a very uncomfortable horror film thing, and I so much so that going into this, I know, and going into this movie, I was like, oh, I'm excited to see what a horror film theater experience is like, and I was like, not this. So maybe the next one. Maybe the next one will be a little bit more sophisticated.
The next one. Well, I can actually tell you what the next one might very well be. And it could be the boldest choice and the hardest pivot for you, JJ, in particular. We're going to be talking about Beau is Afraid, the new 3-hour experience from horror director Ari Aster. I think is it possible? I think we're a mixed bag on Ari Aster movies. And
Steve loves Midsommar.
I stuff it into a bear and light it on fire.
And for me, I mean, those are the kinds of horror films that I appreciate in a way that's very different from what you would expect from Scream and these other things. So I'm very excited for it because now I'm open to taking my mind there. So bold is exactly where I want to go.
I sort of feel like Ari Aster sits down with Joaquin Phoenix and says, tell me everything, and then we'll make a movie about it.
Yes.
So that is coming in April. That's our April fare for now. Thank you for talking about this scary movie, everybody. Steve, good to talk to you.
You know, we all go a little mad sometimes.
JJ, thank you.
Screaming my way to April.
And Tom.
Knives.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month right here on the Film Board.